You're tuned into Zero Signal, a show about what they won't say and what you're probably already thinking. No fluff, no filters, no bullshit. Let's crack it open.
At this time, I'm going to ask you to fasten your seatbelts.
Antarctica, the coldest, most remote continent on Earth. A vast frozen desert buried beneath miles of ice. For centuries, it was a mystery, a blank patch on ancient maps, sparking legends and speculation. Even today, as scientists probe the depths with cutting edge tools, Antarctica guards secrets no one fully understands. Some believe it wasn't always this way. That long ago, Antarctica was a lush and green, thriving land, home to ancient civilizations lost to time. According to this theory, a flood wiped them out, perhaps the very flood described in the Bible when the fountains of the great deep burst forth. Then come the wartime rumors. Secret Nazi expeditions during World War II, searching for ancient knowledge or hidden technology, building underground bases beyond the ice. Supporters of this theory point to strange old maps, like the Priest Reese map of 1513, which some claim depict Antarctica's ice-free coastline. And the legends don't stop there. Stories of the Nephilim, the biblical giants and fallen angels frozen beneath the surface, or entombed in the subterranean chambers waiting. But beyond myth offers real-world wonders. There are hidden lakes sealed beneath the ice for millions of years, entire ecosystems thriving in total darkness around volcanic vents, and massive mountain ranges buried under glacial sheets untouched by human eyes. Antarctica isn't just a frozen wasteland. It's a collision point where science meets history, myth brushes against reality, and spiritual lore casts long shadows. So Jay, with all that in mind, do you think Antarctica is hiding ancient truths, or are we just projecting our deepest mysteries into the land of endless ice?
Yeah, man, that is a great question. Of all the conspiracies we talk about on and off the show, I think this one has a lot of validity and a lot of potential to have a lot of interesting secrets. I think one of the most appealing pieces of evidence is the fact that there's the Antarctica Treaty of 1959. And I don't know the amount of countries off the top of my head, but there's a ton who've agreed not to militarize it, not to make land claims. And you or I just can't go there. A ton of that continent is off limits. You can't fly over it. You can't just roll in a ship, though it would be hard most of the year. And you just can't explore by yourself. And I think that is super bizarre. And it makes me really curious as to what the heck's going on down there.
One of the things I learned about in my research was during the Nazi regime under Hitler, they had gone down to Antarctica and they were searching for artifacts during that time and trying to scour the land. But one of the most important things that they were trying to do is make a legal claim to that land, saying it's going to be an extension of the German Empire. Do you think that treaty of 1959 was ultimately because of that? Like they were trying to prevent people from making a claim on Antarctica and preventing people from owning that territory and leaving it as a scientific discovery versus a national pride or a national sovereign nation.
So you want to talk about weird kind of conspiracies. The whole the 1938-1939 German expedition down there, they claim they went down there to secure a whaling dock or whaling village, or village is not the right word, but you get what I'm saying. That seems completely ridiculous to me. You're about to start World War II, you're about to start it, and you're going around to Tibet, you're digging up all sorts of these ancient sites, trying to find these ancient artifacts or relics. And Hitler was big into the occult. A lot of Nazi symbolism is just doused in occult themes. There's the Thule Society, the Virile Society, all these people looking for the super race, like the Ubermen. And it's just bizarre that he would take the time and expense. It's not like he's going over to France or Britain. He's going to the other side of the world. And you're telling me he's doing that for whale oil? It doesn't seem economical at that point. So there was something else going on there. So they went down there and they called their place New Schwabenland. And the theory, the rumor, the conspiracy is that they created an underground base called Base 211. And after World War II, they all fled down there. First went to Argentina, then went to Base 211. And then we'll get more in depth in this, but then you've heard of the Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd taking 4,700 highly armed men, planes, destroyers, and it's supposed to be a 6-month expedition. And after 6 weeks, they turn around. And apparently, they didn't have everybody with them. They didn't have all the boats. They didn't have the planes. And the story in that is pretty wild.
Yeah, I think eventually they were chased out by what was later identified as a UFO. That was the kind of the last theory of why Admiral Byrd and his crew of ships were chased out of Antarctica. But one of the things I kind of want to touch on is the Nazi regime. As you mentioned, they were heavy into the occult and to collect powerful items. Like one of the things that they were looking for was the Ark of the Covenant, right? It was one of the most powerful items that was found during the biblical times. It contained the power of God. Men couldn't hold it, they couldn't drop it on the ground, they couldn't touch it, or they would be turned to dust. And it's well documented that he was looking for these things. He was looking for the chalice or the carpenter's cup that Jesus drank out because he thought it would give him some type of power or perhaps empower his country. Which is ultimately, though he may have gone down there under a ruse because many people wanted to stake a claim to Antarctica during that time. So he made up, at least in my opinion, he made up a fishing whale oil expedition. I think he was likely looking for the Ark of the Covenant. One of the interesting things is if you scan around Antarctica, have you ever seen the pyramid that sticks out of the surface level? And it's symmetrical, and it kind of points to the north, south, east, and west. And many people think it's like one of the latest discovered or like one of the oldest pyramids that we have today, like even predating the Egyptian pyramids. Have you seen this out there?
Yeah, I have seen some videos and pictures of it. It's pretty interesting. They claim that the pyramid is something like 2,000 meters high, which is insane. And I think it's 2,000 meters on all the bottom base as well. So that would dwarf anything that is in known existence today. I know there's been some debunking done with that, and whether or not that's a psyop or if it's a completely different mountain range, but they claim that it's actually part of a bigger mountain range, but you can't really see it because of the ice sheet over top of it and the heavy snow. But it looks pretty symmetrical to me. And it's an interesting, and there's some interesting stories that kind of tie in with that one as well. But no, I do know what you're talking about.
There are many people that say the pyramid's original design was to house biblical items. And most of them say it was the Ark of the Covenant. And that's why I build that bridge to this gap is perhaps there is a pyramid there and it's containing one of the Arks of the Covenant and concealing it underneath. And perhaps Hitler saw that during his time. And he was going there to try to make that discovery. Like he was trying to find that item to empower his German empire at that time as he was getting ready to embark into World War II and go to war with several nations to secure his, I don't know, his dream race or whatever his philosophy was. I do find it really interesting that you start to see pyramids, we start to talk about ice walls, we start to talk about unknown discoveries, and all of a sudden, the worst of the worst show up. Hitler himself shows up to start looking.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't know why he would have any vested interest in a continent so far away. It's not like he's hanging out. It's not like he lives in Australia. It's not like he's in South America. It's not easy to get to. That expedition took some time. It took over a year. I have a different, my own theory about pyramids. It's interesting that you have pyramids all across the world. They all don't look the same, but they have the same general structure. We can't build them today. It's impossible for us. Just entertain me on this one. I think they're remnants of the pre-world flood. And I honestly think that they were not burial chambers for pharaohs or Amazonian kings or what have you. I think some of them probably ended up in these pyramids because once people bloomed in population, the richest guy on the block, the toughest guy on the block, I want to be buried in there. That's pretty cool. But I think they were used for energy. I think they were energy generators before the flood. It's due to their size and mass, they just weren't washed away with everything else.
It's very close to being a proven theory because it's foundationally based upon Nikola Tesla's innovation, that he was trying to have this unlimited energy. And many people think that the pyramids connected into a grid to create this unlimited energy source during that time. And as you said, like, I agree with you. I think they were probably pre-flood when they were built into existence, just based on the way that they were built and put into place. Sometimes I wonder if the Nephilim helped construct these things during that time, because even though they were fallen angels, they were known to be mighty men. Like they were known to be big and strong and being able to carry these heavy objects. And they had the knowledge, like they brought the knowledge, some of that knowledge down from God. who gave it to him initially. So perhaps we're seeing this pre-flood event come to life, and it's interesting how it's starting to connect to the most unknown place in the world of this vast frozen desert of Antarctica.
You ever hear the nuclear test theory with the Nazi expedition? So the theory is that the Nazis fled Antarctica, and sometime after 1945, they detonated a nuclear weapon down there, and they did that underground. And I guess the theory, and this is where, so we talk about stuff that is super fantastical, and we talk about stuff that is super scientific. I think this kind of goes on the super fantastical side, but the theory is that they set it off to possibly seal off access to a secret base, or to activate alien technology, or to destroy evidence. But apparently, there's some seismic evidence that there was somehow someone detonated something down there in a little after 1945.
One only reason I would punch a hole in that theory is because I think Hitler is such a horrible human being that if he had a nuclear weapon, he probably would have used it as his reign was coming to an end. Before he put a bullet in his head, I think he would have used that nuke.
I absolutely agree. We're just trying to tie in all the weird Nazi stuff. I don't buy it for a second. I do think there's a possibility that Base 211 has some validity. People debunk it, but at the same time, the government debunks a lot of stuff that ends up being true. I do think they went down there. So I think the original expedition was to set up like a whaling center and to topographically map Antarctica. And there was proof that I think they took aerial pictures of 600,000 square kilometers or miles. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. And they did chart a lot of the land. I think it's likely that they kept going down and they did build a base. And there are theories that at the end of the war, a lot of them went down through Argentina and down to this base. And that kind of piggybacks, like I said before, on the conspiracy theory about Operation High Jump and the U.S. and Admiral Byrd going down there to try to root them out. But they got sent back home with the tail between their legs.
Do you know why the Nazis either left or fled Antarctica during that time? Like, why did they leave? Is that documented anywhere?
So I think they left in 1939. So by the time they got back home, I think World War II started at the end of 39. So the popular mainstream theory is that at that point they just had to use all their resources for war. So they were on war footing, and going back down to Antarctica wasn't a top priority at that point. I think they stopped a lot of their other type of exploration into the other artifacts as well once the war kicked off.
Gotcha. So we have Hitler that leaves, I think you said during 1939, before World War II. The next documented interaction we have with folks in Antarctica is Admiral Byrd.
Yeah. So I think in 1946, he took 4,700 sailors, warfighters, and airmen down. And the mainstream, I guess the accepted narrative is that the mission behind that was to test airplanes and ships in extreme cold weather. I think they ran into some issues during World War II and some other expeditions where planes would fail and crash, mainly because of fuel gelling. Just the extreme cold temperatures really affected the mechanical side of the planes and ships, and a lot of them didn't work. So they went down there to experiment and optimize their ships. But there are stories that, like you said, UFOs were flying around. They got into a pretty intense battle. They lost ships, they lost planes, and they came back. And I wish I had the information in front of me. It's probably in my notes somewhere, but mid-episode is hard to get through. But he lost a significant amount of men. And it's interesting because if you pull up the documents, apparently they are either quote-unquote lost or they're heavily redacted. Why would you heavily redact a document about how to improve your airplanes and ships? And why would you bring submarines and destroyers and aircraft that were meant to fight? I don't understand the concept of that unless you knew you were going into a battle. All of his other expeditions, he didn't do that. Heck, one he went down by himself, I think, for all intents and purposes. And the one before his first one, he went with like one or two ships, but they weren't naval combat-ready ships.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is usually the warfighter is training for the next mission, meaning that you think you're going to go to Vietnam, so you start to practice in jungle warfare. And what were they anticipating? War with Russia, like the Baltic states at that point in time, like preparing for snow and ice? That explanation that they gave us, it doesn't make a lot of sense or hold water with me, because why are you taking a huge fleet to Antarctica to prepare for potentially the next battle just at the World War II just ended. Though there was some cold, it wasn't Antarctica cold. So it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense why they would heavily invest all of these resources to train in a place that very few people have ever gone.
Yeah, have you ever seen I can only find one televised interview with Admiral Byrd. Have you happened to seen it?
I haven't seen that one, no.
It's interesting. It's not very long. It's 10 to 14 minutes. I can send you the clip and you can put it in the show notes. But he was being interviewed and his opinion was like yours. But this was in 1956, mind you. This was 10 years after he did that expedition. And he did make a claim that Antarctica was resource rich. He said there was enough coal just in one mountain range to supply the energy used for the whole world. Not that we use coal anymore. He said he's pretty sure that there was uranium there, which is what is needed for nuclear bombs and nuclear power plants. But he did foresee sometime in the future there being a possibility of a war being fought over it. And he did name the Soviets as the main aggressor. So part of me wonders too, like maybe he did get in a battle, but it wasn't with fleeing Nazis, but maybe it was with the Soviets. And at that time, during World War II, they were all prop planes, dogfighting. Near the end, the German had some jet planes. So I'm wondering if the Soviets didn't get that technology and actually have jets out there, and they didn't know what the heck they were seeing because most of those guys probably weren't heavily involved in World War II or just didn't see the few sightings of these quote-unquote miracle jet planes that the Nazis had. Because you've heard of Operation Paperclip, where at the end of World War II, the U.S. tried to get as many German scientists and engineers to come over to the U.S. as fast as possible because the Soviets were doing the same thing. So I think we ended up getting 2,000 scientists and other Nazi party members to come over. But that's a topic for another show, but a lot of those guys got into some pretty high-ranking positions in our government and in our agencies and took a lot of their knowledge and their policies and procedures and imported them over here. And I think we're still seeing some of those today.
It's the Great Circle, because I think in our very first episode, when we were talking about Project Bluebeam, we mentioned NASA and the Nazis coming over to foundationally build NASA from the ground up and get the rockets to the moon during that time. And one of the really interesting stories that I heard that came out of that time is they were very strict with their employees, like under this Nazi regime. So much so that when employees slacked off or didn't do the things that they were supposed to be doing, they used to hang them from the rafters.
Sure.
And just run them out of town. It was like that pure Nazi mentality that really took over NASA during its very early days. And then we just talk about the Great Divide. After World War II, everybody was picking up the pieces and this is mine, this is yours. And I think ultimately that's where the great struggle came between the United States and Russia, even probably to this day, as they try to claim land, whether we try to claim Greenland or Russia's trying to claim Ukraine and put back the former Soviet Union as well. And sometimes I wonder, as you were talking about the battle in Antarctica, I almost wonder, perhaps it was a battle between the United States and Russia during that time, and everybody that was involved in it knew it very well, but they didn't want to express that to the world. They're just getting out of World War II. They don't want to get into another major conflict, and both sides just agreed to step away and walk away and leave that place alone and not claim it as their own.
No, I agree. And even at the end of World War II, General Patton, once they defeated the Nazi regime, he wanted to go into Russia. He was like, let me take my men and steamroll Russia. We might as well get rid of them now because there's going to be a problem in the future. He was right.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't let him do it. It's a good theory because that's not even a year after the war ended. Who wants to keep fighting war? He's burnt out. Everybody wants to go home. Like, they lived through some of the most horrible crap any human can imagine. Let's rebuild. Let's not keep fighting war. But let's tuck this under the rug and hope we can come to a term. And then not 13 years later, there's a treaty saying nobody can lay claim, nobody can militarize. The world's biggest demilitarized zone. And pretty much all the major powers agreed to it.
Do you know why? Do you know why that treaty came about?
So I think, this is 30,000 foot view. I think it had to do with the fact that they wanted to preserve the ecosystem. They didn't want anybody going down there and causing potential conflict by by harvesting the resources. So everyone got together and said that this would just be a scientific type center. So we all can come, we all can do our tests, our experiments, set up our bases, and but that seems an almost unbelievable reason for me. It doesn't make a lot of sense because a lot of people sign treaties and a lot of countries turn around and do the exact opposite not a decade later. And this seems to be pretty on par. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that we had nuclear weapons. She got it shortly after. Nobody wanted to upset the apple cart. It just seems something that doesn't pass the smell test to me.
Yeah, if from my perspective, if you're of the worldview where you think ice has always existed in Antarctica, now there's different views out there where it has and it has not, but it's obviously existed for a very long time. Maybe not the entire span of the world, but it's existed for a very long time. And one of the things that is always like really fascinating to me as we talk about it, that's probably the closest representation as you dig down between miles and miles of ice and you get to that sediment level where it's been untouched by humankind. That's about as close as in this world we're ever going to get to the Garden of Eden. And you wonder at least me, I wonder what's there. What was you're almost starting to see God's original design for this universe as you get rid of the ice and you start to see what foundationally lays there because man hasn't trumped on top of it. Man destroyed it and perhaps it's preserved. Like you throw something in your freezer, it's the same. Whether you put it in today or a year ago, it's still good to go. And there may not be life down there, but there's probably some grass, there's probably some type of living things that live beneath that survived as part of God's original design. So I see it from a scientific discovery standpoint. Like it's kind of like the Amazon jungle where people are like, I don't know if anybody's ever been there. Nobody's ever discovered it. Let's not ruin it for everybody else. So I can see that because I'd be really interested if we could scrape away all the ice. Like what the heck would we find?
Yeah, I just wonder because the ice sheet is so thick and it obviously moves. I feel like if you're buried under a mile of ice and it's moving inches or even centimeters a year, I feel like everything underneath it would just be ground to a pulp. Like you wouldn't really be able to identify much. And then the constant melting and refreezing. If there are artifacts or if there are lost civilizations underneath the ice cap, they're probably ground down. But who knows? Maybe it's not the case.
Yeah, perhaps it could be what layer you're in too. Was there a foundational layer and then you're like in mile one? Because I saw somewhere like if we talk about the ice wall that exists today, some people say it's 3 miles deep, right? Like through ice. And it's like, what layer there do you exist? Because if you're right in the middle, you're pretty well preserved at that point in time.
True. Yeah, I know we're shifting subjects, but the ice wall, like the flat earth people claim that Antarctica is one. So you have the earth and then Antarctica is actually an ice wall that goes all around the earth to keep, to keep water and people from being able to get off. But there's also, I forget what the freaking name of the theory is, but there's also a theory that the earth is a globe, but we are not the only significant, like the landmass we see on our maps is not the only landmass. Some claim that there's a tunnel or a path through the ice wall that kind of goes out to another type of rather large Earth-shaped landmass that has a completely different civilization. Again, we're talking about some of the fantastical stuff, but it's still interesting to think about. And
It'd be cool.
sometimes conspiracy is entertainment, and it's funny. At some point, we may do an episode on. There's people that claim that they did go through this breach in the ice wall and came out to another side, and they were met by, of all things, humans, but they were much more advanced. And they were like, you can't be here, you have to go back. Interesting story. How credible it is, probably not very. But it's great sci-fi novel, sci-fi movie stuff. But it's still fun to think about.
Couldn't they just fly over it, though, if they're like super advanced?
Some of these people claim that these are the aliens we're seeing, or the people on the other side of the ice. And they say the ice wall, like, it's rather high, but it's also 2,000 miles long or longer. So for our planes to fly through it, like you would need to refuel, so it's almost impossible. The people that claim to have sailed to go through it claim to do it by boat.
Gotcha. That's an interesting theory.
There are some maps. There are some interesting maps online. So these people don't necessarily believe that the Earth is flat. They just think the Earth is 100 times larger, 1,000 times larger than it really is, and it's a globe.
Yeah, I just wonder because it could be a psyops. But I just wonder because we have so many pictures of the Earth now that how could we not see it based on all these satellites sending imagery back? It makes me think of this one theory. Have you heard the theory where many people think that Antarctica is formerly Atlantis?
Yeah, I think Hitler believed that, at least to some extent. He thought the lost city of Atlantis or Hyperborea was down there.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there's a theory because of where it exists towards the Ring of Fire and the tectonic plates on our globe, it can cause cataclysmic events. And there's a theory out there that says at one time there's a theory out there that one time people said Antarctica was a kind of a point north or more northernly, and it has subtropical climate where a super advanced race of people existed, and that kind of makes me think of pre-flood days in the Nephilium where they had Atlantis. And then they had this major cataclysmic event that triggered a major shift, destroyed the civilization that lived there, and it shifted into this super cold zone at that time.
Yeah, so another thing that was claimed with this Hitler expedition and this Base 211 is that the theory is that Hitler thought slash knew there was an advanced civilization down there in Antarctica. And part of the reason to go down there was to acquire their advanced technology to help him win the war. Again, I think he gleaned some of his theories from his occult background, soul society, the virile society. So it's just interesting that a lot of these occult things point to, if you want to talk about stuff we talked about in previous episodes, like this Project Bluebeam. But that was part of the speculation that he wanted advanced, not necessarily even alien technology, this advanced technology from an advanced civilization that still resided here on Earth.
And it makes me wonder what's still down there. So I was watching this episode of The Y-File, and the military back in 2003 had dispatched a group of Army Rangers to go down and recover this scientist that was out in the wilds. According to the report, he had very important information, and they wanted them to go out there, recover him, and bring him back. As they land in this particular spot in Antarctica, they walk down this pathway, and eventually they come to this structure that has a door that is somewhere near 20 feet tall. The squad approaches the door, they push on it, and the door is perfectly balanced. The door opens up, they enter in, and they enter into this massive complex. They said it must have been somewhere around 400,000 square feet. The walls were glowing green. They weren't sure how they were emitting light at that point in time, but they were looking for the scientist. And eventually, as they walked down this weird corridor, what they viewed as ancient alien technology, they finally met up with the scientist who told them that the structure was much bigger as it went underground. And I think even more importantly is they didn't know how the walls were glowing, but it was also like 70 degrees inside this structure. So it was also being heated from some unknown source as well. Anyways, they recover the scientists and they ultimately leave. But there is some speculation from this mission that perhaps there is some alien technology that's in Antarctica, or there's something unknown, or perhaps some type of technology or weapons that we are not aware of as a society today.
Yeah, I've never heard of this story. So did the scientists find this place and get lost and couldn't get back home, or were they taken there, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, so there's only one scientist in this particular journey, and there's a lot of military files that have been released, but in this particular journey, there was only one scientist, and supposedly he was down there just to take pictures of the ice wall. So the Rangers were very confused of why they were going down to rescue a scientist who was only taking pictures to document what the ice wall looked like, but somehow he relayed information back to the United States that he had very valuable intelligence. So they dispatched a unit out there. And this is what the guys said as they left. And obviously the rest is probably still not talked about or classified, but they did mention this like really tall door that was perfectly balanced with the emitting lights that were coming out of the wall, which I find just fascinating. Like, what could this actually be? But like a remnants of a former society.
Weird he'd be there by himself. Isn't that bizarre? Of all places in Antarctica? Huh.
And perhaps you were, because it makes me think of another story. And I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head. I think it was somewhere around 2001 or 2003. There were 15 scientists down at a research base in Antarctica. Part of their duties was once a day, they were supposed to check in, I think with the United States government, who was running it. There was a scientific department that was leading it, but they were supposed to check in. Now, 3 days go by and nobody ever checks in. And they're like, holy crap. Like, they have enough material to live. Like, they got a heated structure. They got food for a month. They are very comfortable. But in order for their safety, they're supposed to check in once a day. As 3 days goes by, they don't hear from these scientists. They eventually dispatch another unit of the Army Rangers to go down and check on them. They fly in, they drop at their little airfield there. They unload, and there's actually video footage of this. They unload, they go into the scientific research station. It's in perfect order. There's the shelves are stocked, the computers are on, like everything is functioning as normal. The one weird thing is, of those 15 people, nobody was there. They searched and searched, and they searched this entire scientific research station, and they never found anybody. And they're like, I don't know if they've gone out on a discovery mission and they're like out in the wilds, but they're not going to last that long. So they waited around. You're only going to survive out in those cold temperatures for an hour or two before you have to return and warm up, or you're good as dead. They waited around, and I don't know how many hours they ultimately waited, but eventually they gave up and went home and says, well, it's not uncommon for people to go out and die and never return. But at this point, we can safely say that wherever they are, they're not coming back. They return to their ship where they're stationed. About a week goes by, and they get a panic call from the research station. Scientists screaming on the phone, come pick us up. So they dispatch the same unit back up. They pick up the 15 scientists. They load them up into a giant airplane. They said as they're flying them, the weird thing about the scientists during this time is they wouldn't talk, they wouldn't move, they're catatonic. They just sat there. As they landed into their next destination, was about 3 hours by flight, they still didn't move. Like, they had to bring personnel onto the aircraft to unbuckle them and to carry them out, because a lot of people say they're in they had PTSD, they were in shock. I have a little bit of PTSD myself because of my former background. I don't think it would make me catatonic, though I don't want to compare everybody's personal experience, but I do find it strange. More importantly, where were they for that week? Where they continued not to check in, where they flown people down there and they waited hours and they never found them. Like, where were these scientists? And they never spoke out. Like, the next thing they said is they had flown some people down from Washington, D.C., had met with these scientists, and basically told them to hush, this never happened, don't talk about it. And that's where the story fades away. And there may be some, as you say, fantastical elements mixed in here, but it's clear that a lot of this is reality. This did happen. They're not covering it up. So it makes you wonder, like, where did these people disappear for a week out in Antarctica where you can only survive for hours, not even weeks or days in that environment? But really interesting story. And you don't know a lot about it, but we know that it's not possible under our current understandings.
Do you happen to know what year that event was claimed to take place?
It was early 2000s. So I want to say it was either 2001 or 2003. I can shoot you the article and I can link it in the show notes so that we have it. But yeah, it was early 2000s.
You know what that reminds me of? The reason I asked what year that was, because I don't know if you may or may not remember this, but back in 2016, you had like John Kerry, some Eastern Orthodox Pope, Jubilee, Obama, all going down to Antarctica to see stuff. That, yeah. So this is a big thing. So during that, and I remember seeing it on the news when it was unfolding, quote unquote, real time. And my first thought was, why in the heck are all these powerful politicians and world leaders going down to Antarctica, including high up members of the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Church? That is super bizarre. What's going on? And I know right around that time as well, maybe a little after, Buzz Aldrin went down there for apparently a guided expedition. He had to get life flighted out to New Zealand because he had some sort of congestive heart failure. But sometime between when he was in Antarctica and when he got to the hospital, he sent out a tweet. Oh man, where's the tweet? I sent it to you. I had to.
It was something like pure evil exists there.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I get this right because it freaks me out. Yeah, he tweeted and then later deleted the tweet. We are all in danger. This is evil itself. Or it is evil itself. What is he talking about? That's super, super bizarre. So it almost sounds to me like in 2016 something was found. I bet is two things: an ancient past civilization site or some sort of weird ancient technology, and everybody was going down there to check it out and see what it was. It's also bizarre too that you would send religious leaders down there. Let's point back to Project Blue Beam.
Yeah.
Was there, again, let's get a little fantastical here. Did you meet someone down there? Meet something down there that made you question history, reality as you know it, and they're sending everyone to check it out and give their own opinion? It's just super bizarre. It's a super bizarre treat.
They say people have returned, and I don't know if this has been substantiated or not, but evidently there's this massive facility. I think they say it was something like 4 million square feet. That is, as you went down a level, it just opened up and it was large. And there's many entrances. One they have access to, where the scientist, I guess, found, and where the Rangers ultimately want to rescue him, where they found. But they said they can also be reached by submarine. And I saw this earlier today, where now there's some entrances that as you go down the ice sheet, you start to hit water. Submarines have been going down under that to reach these entrances and interact. And though they didn't say what it was, they say those areas of this particular facility are not vacant. Something exists there, some type of life. They didn't say humans, but they said some type of live creature exists and occupy this structure under those deep levels of it.
The other interesting thing is that you go to Google Earth, and most of Antarctica, the satellite imagery is not available. I also think that's super bizarre. There are some people making claims that there are huge, I don't want to call them domes, but huge craters in the ground that are void of ice. And some people point that to this claim that Hitler detonated nuclear weapons down there. It's interesting. Obviously, you can't verify that exists anymore. And those images are either gone or been scrubbed. So it's interesting. And it's also interesting that we touched on it at the beginning of the show that you can't go there, man. You can't go there. It's interesting. There's over 70 permanent research facilities across Antarctica. These 70 permanent research stations are operated by about 30 countries. Most of them range from year-round stations to seasonal only. 40 plus year-round permanent staff during the winter. 30 seasonal opens only during the Antarctica summer, which is October through February, which is another interesting thing that Admiral Byrd decided to bounce out in the Antarctic summer. I'm sure weather varies, but still a little bit bizarre considering he was equipped to be down there for 6 months. Summer population is between 4 and 5,000 people, mostly scientists, support staff, military, and logistics. And in the winter, roughly 800 to 1,000 people, mostly essential staff only. There's no permanent residents or citizens. Everybody's either a temporary researcher, support personnel, or military logistics staff. Again, it's interesting that they keep throwing out military and logistics staff. I know military does a lot with fly-ins and fly-outs over there. So that's probably the main way to transport the government scientists and such. It looks like the U.S. has 3 main bases in Mercado and a couple smaller ones in the South Pole. Oddly enough, the country that has the most bases is Argentina. It's not odd because it's fairly close, but it's odd because it's relatively a small country compared, or at least in terms of GDP compared to some of the more powerful nations. A close second is Chile, and coming in number 3 is Russia. And then everyone else seems to have, there's a few bigger countries that have 1 or 2 main bases there. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, I almost wonder why people invest so much money to build these military bases in Antarctica, because most of the land is inhospitable. Like, it's a frozen desert. And even if you're going to extract resources, it's going to take so much money that it's going to engulf a lot of these nations' GDP in the first place. And it's almost, is there a reason? Are they, is that like part of their stake in the claim that we own a part of this country? Or I don't even know what you refer to it as, this continent? Or is it something different? Do they know something that we don't know? And the reason why they think it's so valuable that they exist there?
I know. So before the 1959 treaty, there were several countries that had made land claims in Antarctica. I think Australia was a big one. obviously Russia. I'm not sure the U.S. actually ever made a claim. Obviously, Germany did, but when they lost the war, that kind of went out the window. But even with all these claims, when these countries signed the Antarctica Treaty in '59, they gave up those claims, which is interesting. So just to touch on the treaty rules, number one, no military use, no mineral mining, no territorial claims to be recognized or expanded. Like I said, some countries have made claims on Antarctica before that treaty, and there must be scientific cooperation and environmental protection. So it's interesting that we can barely work together in the world, but seem to work together pretty good down there.
We did the same thing with outer space.
Right. Let's go claim the moon, man.
Yeah. I tell you, my former boss wants to build an Amazon facility on the moon and shift production to the moon. I don't know how he's going to make it a reality. It seems really expensive, but that is his dream.
I think Elon Musk wants to make a moon base as well to use as like a hub to get to Mars.
That makes a little more sense versus shipping your Amazon packages to your front door.
Like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why? Unless he's drilling for minerals or whatever else might be up there.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Should-
might make some sense.
Should be an interesting episode to do the moon, the lunar landings, and to talk about the dark side of the moon. I think we could do a full episode on that one.
Man, speaking of Buzz Aldrin, have you seen the videos where he's talking to people? And he's like, because he was the second man to step foot on the moon.
Mhm.
But have you seen the videos where he says, "Yeah, we never went to the moon"? It's
have.
crazy, man. It blows your mind because you're like, this guy is famous for being an astronaut, for being the second guy to step on the moon, and he's saying we've never been there.
Yeah.
Is he losing his mind? And maybe that's why he sent that tweet out about Antarctica, or is he trying to give us a little bit of a blip on the radar as to what's going on?
So I wonder if he's in his late 80s, I think now. So I wonder if dementia or aphasia or something's starting to kick in a little bit. That's tweaking his memories. But I also have my doubts if we actually went to the moon. We haven't been back, right? Like in a very long time, and our technology is 1,000% better in our modern era. So I do have some doubts if we've actually physically been there as well, because we're talking now, and we'll talk about this in a future episode, but we're talking about a time that was very competitive of who's the first person going to make it to the moon. And it was very competitive between us and Russia at that time. So it was a sense of national pride, as a sense of national engagement. We wanted to be the first ones there. Now, did we make it up? I don't know. But I do have some doubts if we actually landed.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you are. I don't necessarily think that we made it. I know it's a proven fact, and correct me if I'm wrong, but all that video, like that famous video where he's stepping on the moon and bouncing up and down, was made on a Hollywood set.
You can't prove it. If you ever seen the video, it's very grainy. And evidently it's a video of a video. And that's why it's so grainy at that time. And you start to see these like weird reflections. But what you can see is the inconsistencies of it, where the way the American flag like floats in space, the sunshine, like having the shadow effect on the moon. And not that we understand all that stuff, at least I'm sure some people do. I don't. But it's highly suspect of what you'd perceive as actually being on.
So I think I don't want to call it a conspiracy at this point, but I also don't want to say it's the official narrative. I think a pretty mainline stream of thinking is that they taped it on a Hollywood set because they didn't have the technology to actually send the video back to Earth or to record the video. Yeah, so they still claim that we've been there, but what you're seeing is not actually from the moon.
That's awfully convenient.
Exactly. Heck, you might as well say you went to Mars. There we go. Dude, I'm not like, listen, I'm not trying to derail the show. Have you seen, so there was a big story a few years ago of like astronomers, they find like a cool planet or a cool star and they take like these high resolution photos and they publish them on like NASA websites or national, whatever, big, like mainstream type of media. And one of them got caught claiming that they took this really cool picture of a planet and they got caught. They took a piece of like pepperoni, sliced it, took a picture of it, and claimed it was a planet.
They just had to be trolling him at that point.
I don't know, man. This person seemed like they actually had a legit career. Like they were like they had all like the neat letters after their name and had some sort of bona fide career in this industry. And they got caught taking a picture of pepperoni and saying it's this distant planet that they discovered.
That
Maybe they're
dude's
doing it for clout or for the reputation or the resume. Come on, pepperoni? Give me a break.
I bet those guys, when they discover stuff, they get like a bonus. Here's a check. Like, you're 30K, good job. You discovered something neat, or you took a picture of something neat that we're distributing around. And you always wonder if corruption comes into play as well.
Oh, I'm sure, dude. I'm sure you get great jobs at universities, at these telescopes, the astronomy labs. I'm sure if you're publicized and you have a pretty thick, cool looking resume, people are going to be more apt to give you that job teaching the up and coming youth how to take pictures of pepperoni.
Take pictures of pepperoni. Was this guy also a chef?
I
But you
think,
had-
I think it was a woman, if I remember correctly. Again, this
Like-
is just stuff I know off the top of my head.
Yeah. Oh, the pepperoni is the perfect solar star. Nobody will know.
Man, it's just the world's a crazy place, man. You can't make it up. So, have you heard of the Admiral Byrd's diary conspiracy?
No, I haven't.
Dude, so this one, it gets pretty wild. So I think it was his son claimed to have found his diary after he died in 1956. So it made its rounds around popular and even not so popular circles. But essentially, and I'm going to chop this up and give you the brief view of it. But he claimed that during Operation High Jump, or one of his other, no, I think it was Operation High Jump, he was flying over Antarctica with a couple of his navigators, just trying to chart Antarctica. And in the process, as he's flying over the ice wall, he starts to note that he sees lush green forest, and he's shocked, and he's thinking to himself, well, this doesn't make any sense. And then somewhere a little bit further into the diary, he notes that he sees what looks like a hairy elephant. Then that's a mammoth. Like, there's a mammoth right here. So as they're flying, he noticed that there's no sun. He can't pinpoint where the sun is because he's using that to navigate down there where he's at. So he starts to freak out. As they're flying, he gets a radio transmission from someone who sounds German saying, "Hey, Admiral Byrd, you're fine. We're going to guide you in. Just sit back. We have control of the plane." He sees two flying disc saucers pull up next to him. He's freaking out. Who wouldn't be freaking out at this point? So they guide him in. He lands on this, in his words, very robust, very technologically advanced city. He gets out of the plane. He meets two very tall, white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, kind of Aryan-looking men. And they escort him into this hall, and he meets someone called the Master. Bizarre name for somebody, the Master. And so the Master proceeds to tell him, like, hey, you're an honorable guy. I think people will listen to you. So I have a message for you to bring back to your leaders and to the world. And essentially, the boil down the message is that you guys are messing around with nuclear weapons. You need to stop. You guys are going to destroy yourself and the earth in the process. And you guys, if you guys can make peace, if you can come together and work things out, you have access to unlimited technology and a great peaceful future together. And they ship him back off. So this was all apparently inside of a diary that his son found. Bizarre story, I know. But it's also interesting too that all this occult stuff, all this new age religion stuff, people talking to quote unquote angels, which I call demons, or fallen ones. The big things are their hangups are nuclear weapons and climate change. It's all the only two messages these people get. And it's just freaking bizarre, man. It's crazy.
As a former detective, I think about chain of custody. So his son found this diary. Did they authenticate it by like handwriting analysis? Did they do any like deep research that actually belonged to Admiral Byrd? Or are we just taking his son, or was it his son or grandson's word of mouth?
So apparently it was his son. I think it has been debunked, but a lot of conspiracy theorists still hold on to it as evidence. Let's talk about this Master fella or whatever it is. Why would you pick one dude to bring? You have all this advanced technology. Why wouldn't you just go and tell them yourself? Like, why do you just send one guy? That right there doesn't make any sense.
Or even send a message, whether it's through the radio waves or whatever, to the masses.
The other interesting part, the part that was highly bizarre, was that the insignias on these flying saucers that were escorting him had Nazi insignias on. It is interesting. It almost sounds like a piece of science fiction.
It does. So when we talk about the Nazi insignia, it's the broken cross, which actually predates the Nazi Empire. Like he bastardized it, he took it in as of
Yeah, it's
himself,
like
and
Indo-European like symbol or something.
it's been around for a long time, and a lot of people kind of want to. I think it's probably trying to take a hit at Christianity and breaking that cross. I could be wrong, but it's interesting. I was talking about when those Rangers came to the unique structure in the ice where they took that researcher out by himself who made the major discovery. As they entered that building, they saw all these hieroglyphics on the walls. They weren't Nazi symbols, but they said it looked like ancient Egyptian, like hieroglyphics that just went down the wall. They didn't understand them. They wanted them to be researched, but somebody was writing out there. I don't know, man. For me, when I see these things, I think of pre-flood. I think of the Nephilim. I think of the fallen angels and the influence, though it's a very small section of our Bible because the story of Enoch, I think it was the story of Enoch was taken out, like it was decanonized.
Yeah.
During that time, they talked a lot about the Nephilim. But I always think about it because they call them the men of renown in the Bible. And they were known to be very powerful, very strong, very big. And to create these amazing things that kind of predate our modern era, I wonder what influence they had on that. And because of that, like we saw with the Tower of Babel, as the tower starts to reach towards the heavens, God destroyed it. And they said, you know what? Instead of worshiping yourself and building your fancy machines, your fancy towers, turn your eyes back towards me. And I wonder if we're starting to see those remnants of it in Antarctica, where they have these like really amazing buildings and amazing technology that many years ago, the gods just said, you know what? That's done. Focus back towards me.
Think about it. It'd be a great place if it does exist down there. It'd probably be the one area where you could find it undisturbed. I think just over the course of civilization, especially in Europe and Asia, and even not so bad here in North America, but a lot of civilizations built on top of old civilization. So a lot of that stuff gets destroyed in war. A lot of that stuff gets buried under a new set of buildings. So it's really hard to see because of the sheer amount of people coming in and out of the planet in that particular landmass over thousands of years. You can see it in like France and even like London, like there's underground catacombs. There's archaeologists dig and they find civilizations under civilizations because they're just built on top of. And it's wild. But Antarctica would be one of the few places where if they were left intact, they would just be under ice and they wouldn't be trampled over by the humans that come after the fact.
It's interesting because the Bible often refers to the ends of the earth as places of spiritual testing, exile, or divine encounters. And I almost wonder if there's a hidden message in there. When we think of Antarctica, we think of the ends of the earth. Most people don't understand it. It's outside of our total comprehension as a society today. And I wonder if that's almost means, like when we talk about preservation and these divine encounters, whether it be heavenly encounters or the occult encounters. I wonder if that's what he's referring to.
If you think about it too, so say let's just I don't necessarily believe in aliens. I think a lot of it's either government or demonic activity. But let's just indulge me here. If you are an alien and you're visiting a planet with 8 billion people, where are you going to set up shop? You're going to set up shop under the ocean, or you're going to set up shop in the Arctic or Antarctic, where nobody's around, where nobody can bother you, where nobody can see you. If you have all this technology, it's not like you can't fly back and forth in seconds, given how fast some of these craft are claiming to be going. So why wouldn't you set up in Antarctica? I would. I'm out of sight, out of mind. I can do whatever I want. No one's going to bother me, or I do it underneath the ocean.
They're inhospitable locations. So as long as you can survive there, it's the perfect place. And I imagine that fallen angels probably can survive anywhere here in the world. It's a perfect place to hide out. I personally don't believe in UFOs. I think God would talk about them. That's why it goes back to my worldview. What we know in the Bible, what he teaches us is ultimately like the ultimate discovery. And I think he probably would have warned us about it as well. So we wouldn't get sidetracked. Like we wouldn't fall and worship other gods just because an alien showed up. So that's why I always talk about like the Nephilim and stuff, is because that's my worldview, it's a biblical narrative of how can you explain these really unusual facts and circumstances. And I think it's centered around the fallen angels. It's centered around God and Christ and all these things that God delivered to us in a message.
I mean, it's definitely a battle against powers and principalities. Christ even says that. And I think they have a lot of influence on our society, even to a certain extent, like our personal lives, just manipulation and all that crazy stuff. So, you know the story of Superman. We used to love that movie when we were kids. It's interesting that the Fortress of Solitude was somewhere in a place that looked like the Arctic or the Antarctic. So sometimes I think you get this reflection from media to maybe some hidden truths. It's just interesting. Like you have a Superman, which would be considered a little g god back in the day, Nephilim, with these superpowers that can fly all around. And where does he go to hide? Where does he go to get his mind back together? Where does he go to recover? He goes to the middle of a freaking ice desert.
So I got to ask you a question. So are you of the school of thought that Antarctica has always been covered by ice and snow?
I am not, because I think pre-flood, I'm not sure that there was actually any. I'm not under the belief. I think pre-flood, the earth was very lush. I think it was much warmer. I think the atmosphere was much denser. And I think the oxygen content was much greater. I think the ice, this is just my personal opinion. I think these ice caps and these vast swaths of cold regions in our north and south are a product of post-flood weather.
I think it's a good thought for sure. One of the things I think about when we think about Antarctica is the hollow earth theory. Have you heard of the hollow earth theory?
I have.
And and we could talk about it a little bit, but one of the things I think about is during Noah's time, they talk about not only like the rain falling down, but the waters coming from below. And if I think about how this magnificent ice wall was built and developed, like 3 miles deep, I saw a study where like one point it was 3 miles deep of just solid ice. I almost wonder, did God punch the hole there to flood the earth from below in this crater that evidently exists there? And as the water shot up and started freezing the world, perhaps it started also like him changing the temperature of the world, and it started to build the ice wall from the frigid temperatures. So I almost wonder if the waters from below came from there. In my opinion, it would make sense. Is like how you fill up a bathtub, right? It's at one end of the world, and as it starts to fill up with rain, and from the waters from below. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the hollow earth theory for our viewers, but I wonder if there's some connective tissue there.
Yeah, I kind of struggle with the hollow earth theory. The reason I struggle with it is because you've heard of the concept of Pangea, where like all continents were like, you can even look at the map, you can fit them together perfectly. I personally think, and this is just my opinion for now, and it could be open to change. I think when the flood started, I think what happened was like, I think if the earth is hollow, that's where a bunch of water was before. And then obviously you had the firmament, and I think the firmament collapsed, so it started pouring down rain. And I think the earth expanded. And when it expanded, the crust broke apart and water started flooding up too. So do I think the earth is hollow? No. Do I think that there's pockets that could, if you were advanced enough, like that you could make work for like something like a city? Yeah, of course. There's massive caves underground. But I don't believe that there's the outer earth and then there's an inner earth with a smaller globe with its own sun where there's another population. Though there are lots of stories of people going down there and saying that's the case. I don't believe any of them personally.
I don't believe them either. And I wonder if it's like figurative, because I think at the center of the earth, at least is what the scientists tell you, is there's like a core of molten lava that's like at the center. And then it's protected by, it reminds me of that. I think the hole is in Russia, where like they dug the deepest hole in the world, and they dug down as far as they could go. And a lot of people call it the pit of hell today.
Yeah.
As they opened up this hole, they hear people screaming and crying and gnashing of teeth as they got far down. Have you heard about that?
Yeah. If you want to get like, so the Bible touches that like hell is actually in the center of the earth.
Yeah.
They're not like, it's a different dimension within the earth. I don't know. I think heaven's a different dimension. I don't think you fly out of outer space and meet God. I also think Earth was made for man to inhabit, so what's to say that his souls aren't trapped here, just in a different dimension, aka hell? No, but I do think there's vast caverns in the Earth, like caverns you could probably fit 10 million people. Whether or not anyone's there or not, probably not. Whether or not there's cities down there, probably not. You've heard of the deep underground bases. We make them all the time in this country. And some of them, there's stories, legit stories of guys driving trucks underneath a mountain and they're just going down and down with trucks and delivering massive amounts of goods. And they say these places are freaking like cities. So I think if that is, in my opinion, what Hollow Earth is, people digging underground, structuring it, making like a doomsday type bunker for government continuity if there's a war. And part of me thinks, again, another episode, part of me thinks that sometimes I wonder if these people are planning for like an asteroid hit or maybe they know something's coming. Because there's a lot of money. We're $30 trillion in debt in the United States. That money's going somewhere. It's not going to food stamps and whatever else you may have. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Again, different episode, different topic. I would love to do that one soon because I think that one's super interesting and there's a lot of hard evidence. A lot of it's just not conspiracy. A lot of it is backed up by hard evidence.
We know that they make bunkers. I went to Fork Union Military Academy. The short, very short history of that is, even though it was just a high school and grade school for kids that went there during World War II, was actually a target. And even during the Cold War, it was a target because people thought it was actually a military base and not just like a school for kids during that time. And I remember when I went to school there, me and my buddies would sneak out at night and there was like hidden underground bunkers underneath the school there. And I don't know how deep they were. They didn't feel super deep. It was like probably 2 stories deep that would go down. And there was all this old furniture and old barrels and old food that would just be stockpiled underneath. And that's what they did for like a high school kids. Could you imagine what they do for the president and for Congress and for the Senate?
Right.
They're drilling into mountains. They're drilling way underneath because they're supposedly going to survive that doomsday event. Now, I don't believe that. I think when God destroys the world, he's going to judge everybody. So no matter where you hide, you're not going to be protected. But it's pretty interesting to think about those circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the big underground, quote unquote, underground cities or civilizations is called Agartha. And it claims that it's underground. And again, same old dog and pony show, like advanced technology, great peaceful civilization. Everyone's super enlightened and philosophical. Yeah, you can go down the line. It'd be interesting to do a deep dive on that one for sure. It's funny because we talk about these these conspiracies, and they all like have a similar thread going through. You pull on a thread and you get somewhere else. You pull on a thread and it's just like that rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper every time. And it's interesting. That's why I love the topic. I just think that a lot has been interjected into it. Again, we talk about this 9 truths and 1 lie. Good luck trying to find the lie.
To me, it always comes down to one thing because we always have a similar conversation where we talk about Project Bluebeam, we talk about Prospera, or we talk about Antarctica today and perhaps next week. To me, it always comes down to 3 things: God, money, and power. Because that's humanity. Either you seek God or you seek money and power. And people are hoping to influence that. And people are going to tell 1,000 lies in order to get their way, whether it be the government of the United States trying to cover stuff up, or people trying to spin their own narrative, or people trying to tell the truth of what they found out there. But it always comes down to those central themes. As I mentioned, we're going to pick this episode up next week to talk more about Antarctica and all the findings that were down there. It reminds me of Indiana Jones. I loved that movie growing up. There's a whole lot of discoveries to be made.
You talk about Indiana Jones, and as I was researching this episode, especially with the Hitler stuff, you remember all the movies, he's always fighting Nazis, trying to get all the artifacts. And it's funny how, again, popular culture kind of reflects reality and conspiracy. It's fun. It's a fun interaction. And for me, and I think we've talked about this before, conspiracy is a lot about trying to find the truth in the entertainment, trying to find the truth in the fantasy. In my opinion, I think there's enough circumstantial evidence to suggest that there is something down there. Do I think it's aliens? No. Do I think it's remnants of a lost civilization? Absolutely. A good possibility. Do I think there's old, angelic pre-flood technology that they discovered, I think that's a great possibility. And if there are talking beings down there, they're talking to demons, man, or the fallen ones. But I don't think it's a little green man from Pluto coming down to drop a little knowledge seed on all of us.
Pluto's not even a planet anymore, so
I
it's just
know,
like a
right?
rock
Look
in
at that.
space or
Look at
something.
that. Just floating on a rock, but he just needs a home, man. Let him in.
Yeah, as I think about this stuff, it's a whole lot of fun. It reminds me, like I said, of my favorite movie growing up, Indiana Jones, swinging the whip, fighting the Nazis off, and making new discoveries. I think ultimately is with everything that we do, there's a mixture between reality and perception. And trying to find that truth is one of the most important things we can do, whether biblically or through these narratives that we experience and throughout our life. There's a lot of people that are going to tell you stuff is not true, or whether it's not true about God. They're wrong. Whether it's not true about these civilizations or these government projects that are going on or the threats of wars or whatever it may be. There's a lot of people that are going to manipulate you and change your mind because it goes after their narrative. I think it's always good to have discernment and to think critically. And sometimes it's just fun. But as we progress as a society or as we progress as people, as we march towards the end times, discernment's going to be really valuable because it opens your eyes to things that you should not be looking at, meaning that you can't be persuaded by the false prophet. So the more you know, and as that age-old adage comes, knowledge is power. So it's important to do these independent discoveries yourself, to collect the information. And ultimately, it just teaches you how to do it, right? As you focus your eyes on the Lord, which I think is the most important thing that we do. For me, I don't believe in aliens. I think God would have talked about them if they existed because he would have warned us and prepared our hearts and minds. Ancient civilizations, I agree. I think that there's something to that. I always go back to the fallen angels. I wonder how much influence they had on our society. They must have had a lot of influence because God destroyed them. It was bad. God found them, thought it was bad. And it wasn't just bad because they rejected God, much like Satan did. It was bad because of the influence. It was turning people against God. It was changing their hearts. I think there's something there. I think there's a lot of discoveries that still need to be made. I wish we would invest more time and resources into making discoveries here in our world versus maybe shooting rockets off in outer space where it matters less because it's more important here. But yeah, I think the truth is ultimately out there. And I think it's important that we discover it.
Yeah, like I said, it's just the circumstantial evidence. The tree, the fact that you and I get you and I would not survive in Antarctica, let's be real. But the fact that people who are well equipped just can't go and explore tips me off a little bit that something's there that they don't want you to see. And then the satellite imagery that's not on Google Earth or any sort of satellite type software you can use. Another weird one. So those three things alone point in it is a conspiracy. That's the definition of a conspiracy. You're putting the pieces together. You're trying to control the information, to control the narrative, to let people know what you think and not what the truth is.
And it's what's funny is it starts at day one. Because if you ever look at a modern day map, Antarctica stretches all across the bottom shape.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, it's actually not reality. It's about the size of maybe North America, a little bit smaller than Canada and America combined. And so they started spinning those lies from day one as they created the maps. And if you ask a lot of people the shape of it, they probably couldn't tell you.
The last thing I want to talk about before we close out, the Perry Reese map, I think you brought up at the beginning in the intro. So when he mapped that, he didn't map it with ice. And that was back in 15 something. He very well could have been, he very well could have thought he was in Antarctica, but been in maybe Australia or South America and just got confused. But they said the coastline lines up pretty close to what it is today, at least where he claimed he was. I find that really interesting. And I know just our climate goes through hot phases and cold phases. So maybe he was there in a time when it was warmer than normal and he got to see maybe the ice caps were 200 miles inland. He never saw it. He actually saw land, and apparently he drew it with trees, suggesting that there was vegetation down there.
Not only did he draw it with trees, he drew it with mountains where they're exactly placed.
It's wild.
So it was fairly accurate. It was just devoid of ice at that point in time. And though I'm not a strong believer in climate change, I think the world just goes through fluctuations. The thaw, it's hardening as the world just spins around the globe. Yeah, I think it's a very real possibility that at one point it was a subtropical climate with trees and oceans. And I remember seeing that map. Have you ever seen the map of Antarctica? If you remove all the ice, it almost looks like an island chain,
It
like
is.
that you would
It's
find.
archipelago, yeah.
Yeah, which is it's cool to see and
Yeah.
pretty rare because if you look towards the North Pole, that's a landmass.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Antarctica is 5.5 million square miles. Without the ice cap, it's 4.8. So there's almost no 55. Oh my gosh, I got the numbers wrong. 55.5 million square miles as it stands with the ice. 48.5 without the ice caps. There's a lot of freaking ice down there. Apparently, so this fun nerd facts. So it accounts for 70% of the world's fresh water.
Wow.
And if everything melted, the seas, according to scientists, the seas would rise. If that whole entire ice cap melted, the seas would rise 200 feet, which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
That's a ton
Especially
of water.
where I live because mine would be gone.
Yeah. You need a submarine, bro. You better get that bunker with the submarine in it.
Yeah. I've seen that. If all of Antarctica melted, like how far the sea level would rise, and it's like up to Pennsylvania. So I'm swimming for a long time to get home.
Yeah, I'm like, do I live? I don't even think I live above 200 feet above sea level up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, get into like the Appalachian before you get to that point.
I live at sea level, so I'm done.
You're like 3 inches above sea level. All right, man. I think we touched on a lot of subjects there, man. We'll have to drill down a little further and some other cool stories next week. Yeah, like I said, Jesus loves you. We love you. Thanks for listening. We will have, if you're listening to this episode, we already have our socials up. We just created skeleton copies of them today. If we're fortunate enough to have you listen to us, please and subscribe. We will have Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. If Dave wants me to add anything else, I will, but that's the rough basis right now. This is our 3rd episode, but like I said, we'll be releasing soon, and if you're listening to this, they all should be up.
Yeah, thank you for that, brother. Like always, it's fun. At the end of the day, it's just amazing to be able to connect with you and talk about these fascinating topics. For our listeners, I do truly appreciate you turning in. It's not just about following us. It's about engaging with us. We're just two Christian brothers. So engage with us on social media. Tell us why we're wrong. Tell us why we're right. We just want to talk to you. We want to talk to like-minded individuals, or perhaps not, and have good constructive conversation, because that's ultimately what it's about as we have discernment through these topics. Yeah, reach out, talk to us. Let's have some fun. Until next time, this is Signal Zero. We're out.
Peace.
We've hit the 0 hour. That's a wrap on this week's transmission. New episodes drop weekly, so stay tuned and don't miss the next signal. Follow, subscribe, and spread the word. You've been listening to Zero Signal. We're out.